So for this next session, we are going to tackle the dreaded Scope 3. We're going to crack Scope 3, digital pathways to decarbonize supply chains. If I can ask my two speakers to go ahead and make their way up here. We've heard a lot about Scope 3. Scope 3 is the overwhelming majority of the emissions that companies are dealing with. But they're obviously incredibly challenging. They require collaboration. We've heard often suppliers are kind of shared among companies, but also require sort of digital solutions. And where there is a big challenge, there's also often a business opportunity. And so I'm glad to be here with two entrepreneurs, two reasonably young businesses, right, that are sort of working in this area to provide sort of digital solutions to tackle Scope 3. So firstly, Sam Stark, CEO of Green Project Technologies. Sam, welcome. And then Matt Langley, Executive Director of Green Wave Advisory and a former procurement leader at CBRE. So Sam and Matt, thank you for joining. Sam, I'll come to you first. Maybe say just a little bit about what you do at Green Project Technologies. But why are Scope 3 emissions such a persistent challenge for companies, and where are you seeing the biggest gaps today, and how does that line up with what Green Technologies is doing?
Yeah, so I founded Green Project about 6 years ago, and then we got acquired by ACT a couple years ago. And before that was focused on Scope 3 emissions at Goldman Sachs, which was primarily our finance emissions and our supply chain emissions. And kind of since then, and this problem of Scope 3 has come up again and again, I know for many people in this room. And obviously, it's so challenging because of really two huge reasons. One, the scale. Obviously, companies have hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of suppliers. And second is the different levels of maturity these suppliers are. They're not all the same. Some might be more advanced than you and have committed science-based targets, and some might not even know what the GHG protocol is. So there's a wide range in your upstream, and you really need to figure out solutions that tailor to each supplier. And on this, I would say procurement is your friend. I think a lot of times sustainability champions don't involve procurement early enough. And procurement are the ones who have the relationships with the suppliers. The category managers have the relationships with the suppliers. And so what you need to do is you need to empower and enable procurement to really help drive the changes you're trying to see in Scope 3. And in order to do so, you need to give them tools, and tools that are flexible, that can cover everything from doing a CCF with a supplier, to doing a product carbon footprint, to help setting a science-based target, to help procuring renewable energy. And that's why I think digital tools, and why I left Goldman to do this, really allow that scale and that different versatility that you need when addressing things from a procurement angle.
Well, so in terms of the moving beyond, so you need the digital tools, right? But how do you make sure that it doesn't just become a spreadsheet and actually goes into kind of real action?
Yeah, I would say, this was a big thing when we got acquired from ACT was, and no pun intended that it was, the acronym is ACT, that I think too much right now has been focusing just on measurement. And that is an important part. You want to engage the suppliers. You need to get more granular data so you can then take action. And I think we're now getting closer and closer to 2030, whether we like it or not. And action is becoming more and more imperative. And so we purposefully, within the tool over the last few years, moved beyond just doing corporate carbon footprints and product carbon footprints to actually what next? What can we now enable with suppliers? Because you're already building these relationships, especially with the more advanced ones. And yes, target setting is one form of it, but action is another. And renewable energy procurement, we found one of the most scalable ways to do it. And that's one of the campaigns you can do here. And we've done this with everyone from the Microsoft and Amazons of the world to mid-market private equity firms, you name it. We've done these sorts of campaigns with. And so moving to action is really important, but it's not just renewable energy. We've also created a whole scenario forecasting within the platform where you can start building different decarbonization levers with the suppliers. And like I said, one supplier is not this, every supplier is not the same solution. So you really need to be able to tailor it for the different levels of sophistication. And that's where we really tried to build with, again, procurement and the suppliers in mind, because I don't think all these tools are created equal. A lot are just for general reporting, and we've really tried to hone in on what is procurement and what is your suppliers need.
So Matt, obviously you're a former procurement leader at CBRE.
Yep.
I have here managing 130,000 suppliers. Is
Yeah.
there an extra zero there, or is that real?
No, I was super jealous of the panel saying they had 1,200 suppliers. I'm like, oh my God, that would be so nice.
Yeah. So from that vantage point, maybe a little bit about, was it your experience there that led you to set up Green Wave Advisory, but also sort of what makes kind of Scope 3 so challenging from a procurement perspective? Is it just is it data?
So a decarbonising solution has three key aspects when you think about it from a supply chain. You've got the supplier engagement, you've got the decarbonising pathways, and then you've got the reporting and the data. And those three aspects really work together. And Sam also talking about the different maturity levels that you have with suppliers. So for CBRE, the key challenge is really the number of suppliers.
Yeah.
So every supply chain is different. Every supply chain has a certain amount of products or a certain amount of services. You have different geographical requirements coming in. And you have a Heineken that has 100 suppliers represent the majority of their emissions, or you have the big pharma that have 300 to 500. You have Schneider Electric that has 1,015 suppliers that are their kind of high emitting. At CBRE, there was 7,500. So the 130,000, when you looked at what are the top 90% of the emissions coming from, it was 7,500, 7x the nearest program. You cannot do that alone. You need to have a partner, and so really, it was my sort of Everest moment or the oh shit moment a couple of years ago, where I was trying to work through saying, okay, 7,500 suppliers need to engage. CBRE had made a commitment to be net zero by 2040 and halfway there by 2030. EcoVadis's report at the time said it takes 5 years for companies to go from low maturity to high maturity. And so to 2025, that at the time we had to reach out to all 7,500. And so that is where I'm like, okay, we need a tool to be able to engage that number of suppliers. And also that the kind of this size of investment you need to do for the team, which of course was a business case that I was looking to develop at the time. In the end, I didn't get it for the people. I got it for the technology, and yeah, with sort of 4 key problem statements working through on that. Yeah. We're able to really engage with the majority of them and kind of get the program going.
So what are those problem statements, the key problem statements?
Yeah, so the first problem statement is where you're kind of saying, okay, I'm ready to start decarbonising my supply chain. And there's a strong business case for that, because if you also have a net zero commitment that's a time in the future, the longer you take, the steeper that you need to engage with more suppliers and decarbonise. And suppliers need time to build business cases and do things. So just because you're ready to decarbonise doesn't mean your supply chain is ready. And they will be at different maturity levels as well. So then you're like, okay, well, second problem statement is if you start thinking, well, I'll just do it myself. I know like emission factors better than my suppliers. I know what my spend is, and I'll bring that together. And if you start using industry average emission factors, they're a good start to give you hotspots. But the more you spend, the more your emissions go up. So you actually need that primary data from that suppliers, which means you get back to problem statement number 1, and you need to engage with them. The other part we've kind of found actually in problem statement number 1 is that 75% of your suppliers probably have never calculated their carbon emissions before. They may have done scope 1 and 2 a little bit, but they definitely haven't done scope 3. So that was the research that we found 2022, and it played out in our program. It played out in the Schneider Electric program as well. So there's a significant number of your suppliers that are really at this low maturity. And you, right. But if you hit them at the low maturity by saying like, we need your scope 3 data, you'll lose them straight away. But if they're high maturity and you say, this is what carbon emissions are, you'll lose those groups too. So you kind of need to work through that engagement really at the right level and provide them the tools that they need to be able to calculate in a very easy way. And then you had the third problem statement. Most procurement teams don't have a strong supplier relationship management program or solution. Most of them will rely on the finance system information where their spend and their supplier name and things, which is great, except generally the contacts and the finance systems are of the suppliers' finance teams who don't always want to talk about sustainability.
Right.
And you really need to talk to their sustainability lead or the procurement lead or the account manager. And so you've got the wrong contacts even to engage. So you need to look through and how do you look to fix that? And the fourth problem statement that I found is really around education. You need to educate your clients and your customers. You need to educate your internal teams, your category managers, your buyers, and you need to educate your suppliers. And really, if you start looking at that, one thing I do actually, there are some nice things about Scope 3 as a concept.
Yeah.
We always talk about the bad things, but the Scope 3 is designed for there to be joint ownership of the emissions.
Yeah.
And so at CBRE being a facilities management company or real estate company, we started working with the clients and say for cleaning, they had certain requirements of the way they wanted their kind of office space cleaned. And so that drove emissions for them in their Scope 3, CBRE in their Scope 3, and the suppliers in Scope 1, 2, and 3. And so often it was bulk chemicals with big plastic and it feels clean. But if you move to an ionized water solution, there's a 20% reduction in cost and more than 50% reduction in emissions. And so if the client agreed to that, their emissions went down, CBRE's emissions went down, suppliers' emissions went down. And so there's really this opportunity to work across the value chain and work together with your clients and your suppliers, with you in the middle.
That's why we're lucky to have Matt as a good advisor who's helped really shape kind of building it, because we wanted somebody from a procurement perspective to really give us these insights, because I think otherwise you're just creating a platform just for tracking. But when you can actually have it add value to procurement and actually have a ROI to it for the procurement team, you can get much better engagement from the suppliers directly.
Okay. Last question, because we're running out of time. Looking forward, where do you see the sort of biggest opportunities for innovation in Scope 3, say in the next 5 years? Briefly, if you can.
For myself, I think the biggest thing we're trying to do is more, I know AI can be used as a buzzword, but I think we want to do more for creating scenarios for different types of persona. So you're, a category manager, you want to see, if I make these changes, what does this do to our emissions by 2030 or by 2040? You can type in the different scenario and see it directly change on your dashboard. The same goes for kind of all different targets or decarbonization initiatives. You say you want to see how the grid's decarbonizing in these regions with my top suppliers. You type it in and get to see a forecast of how that's changing. And I think that will bring a lot of insight, because I think there's a lot of unknowns right now.
Matt?
Yeah, I think the procurement category managers can be the superstars of the future. They can really, with some AI and having upstream orchestration, a lot of the external and internal data can start coming together, and they can start looking through the value chain or the supply chain. So most of them would have spent 10 years negotiating with their first level of suppliers, their tier one, and they would have got some savings coming in, but you're kind of down to not much left. If they then say and have the time and start working through the different tiers of the supply chain to tweak like we did at CBRE with the client and the supplier, then they'll be able to find a lot of other opportunities for efficiencies and for reduction in waste and nature and labour human rights aspects. And, final comment, procurement, well, I've used sustainability in procurement as a concept for a long time, because it's about doing more with less.
Yeah.
And so if you bring that thought coming through, then there's huge opportunities, huge innovation options.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you both very much. I think really interesting technical solutions that you're providing, but also very practical guidance as well. And I know many in the audience, I'm sure, will want to come speak to you because I'm sure they're struggling with these issues. But thank you both very much, Sam and Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Round of applause, please.